A newborn, cradled in a baby sling. A toddler giggling over a favorite chocolate treat. A family member taking medicine for a simple headache. These were everyday moments, peaceful, routine, and wrapped in trust. But behind each one was a product from a world-famous brand, and a hidden danger no one saw coming. What followed were tragedies that shook families to their core, lives lost in ways no one could have predicted, all because of the brands millions rely on every single day. These are the most disturbing true stories where trust turned fatal.
This was a terrible tragedy for 7 families.
He took my life, shattered my life and my family life.
In 1982, America was shaken, not by a war, not by a natural disaster, but by something far more chilling. The realization that even the most ordinary part of daily life could turn deadly in an instant. It started quietly, with a handful of people reaching for relief, something for a sore throat, a headache, a minor pain. They weren't reckless, they weren't doing anything dangerous. They were just like any of us, and they trusted the name on the bottle. That trust cost them their lives. The first victim was 12-year-old Mary Kellerman, a bright-eyed girl from Elk Grove Village, Illinois. On the morning of September 29th, she had a runny nose and a sore throat. Her parents gave her a capsule of extra-strength Tylenol. Minutes later, she collapsed. By the next day, she was gone. Her death felt sudden, tragic, and unexplainable, but it was only the beginning. Later that same day, 27-year-old Adam Janis, a family man from Arlington Heights, took a Tylenol capsule for minor chest pain. He collapsed and died shortly after. In the unimaginable hours that followed, as his family gathered to mourn and support each other, 2 more lives were lost. His younger brother Stanley and Stanley's wife Teresa. They had each taken a capsule from the same bottle while at Adam's home. Within minutes, both collapsed. Both were dead. 3 members of one family. Gone. And no one knew why. Across the Chicago area, more deaths followed. 31-year-old Mary McFarland, a working mother, took Tylenol during her shift and never made it home. Paula Prince, a 35-year-old flight attendant, was found lifeless in her apartment, an open Tylenol bottle on the counter. Mary Reiner, just 27, had recently given birth. She took Tylenol to ease her recovery. She never stood a chance. All were healthy. All trusted what they were taking. All were dead. The pattern was subtle at first. Different ages, different towns, different situations. But the death toll was climbing fast. Fear began to spread, and with it came a haunting question. What was killing them? The breakthrough came not from high-ranking officials, but from Helen Jensen, a sharp-eyed public health nurse from Arlington Heights. Sent to investigate the Janis deaths, she noticed a bottle of Tylenol on the kitchen counter, with a receipt from that very day. 6 capsules were missing. Her gut told her something was wrong, something deeply wrong. She handed the bottle over to authorities. What came next confirmed every fear. Nick Pichos, an investigator with the medical examiner's office, opened the bottle and immediately noticed something strange, a faint almond-like odor. It was the unmistakable scent of cyanide. Further testing by toxicologist Dr. Michael Schaffer revealed a terrifying truth. 4 of the remaining capsules contained enough potassium cyanide to kill several people, nearly 3 times the lethal dose. The capsules weren't medicine. They were poison. A warning was issued across Chicago. Panic exploded. Shelves were cleared. Households stared in horror at their medicine cabinets. What had once been a trusted staple was now a potential killer. Investigators scrambled to trace the origin of the tampered bottles. Mary Kellerman's Tylenol had come from a lot labeled MC2880, the same lot as the Janis family's. But it didn't stop there. Other contaminated bottles were traced back to different lots. The poisoning wasn't limited to a single batch. This was no manufacturing error. This was deliberate, calculated, and devastating. Then a letter arrived. A man named James William Lewis, living in New York City, claimed responsibility. He demanded $1 million to stop the killings. He was arrested and convicted. not for murder, but for extortion. And while he sat in prison, the families of the victims sat with a heavier truth. The killer had still not been found. To this day, more than 4 decades later, no one has ever been charged with the murders. 7 innocent people died, but the ripples reached far wider. Trust was shattered. Confidence in over-the-counter medication gone. But from the ashes of that nightmare came reform. Tamper-evident seals, child-proof caps, clear warning labels. All of it became law because of what happened in Chicago, because of those 7 lives.
Added Ford's failure to act resulted in the deaths of 3 women on an Elkhart County road. Infantino said Ford management was told a $6 per car improvement might prevent fuel from leaking in a rear-end collision. But management decided it was too costly.
It was a quiet summer evening in 1978, the kind where nothing feels urgent and everything seems safe. 3 teenage girls, Judy Ulrich, 18, her sister Lynn, 16, and their cousin Donna, also 18, were headed to a volleyball game in Indiana. The road stretched peacefully before them along U.S. Route 33. Judy was behind the wheel of their 1973 Ford Pinto. At some point during the drive, she pulled over to the shoulder of the road, just a quick stop to tighten the gas cap after filling up. A simple errand, harmless, routine. Then everything changed in an instant. A van, driven by 21-year-old Robert Duggar, came up behind them. Maybe he didn't see them in time. Maybe it was just bad timing. Either way, he rear-ended the Pinto. It wasn't a high-speed crash. Under normal circumstances, it might have just been an insurance claim and a shaken conversation on the roadside. But these weren't normal circumstances. The moment of impact tore open a deadly secret Ford had been hiding. The Pinto's gas tank, positioned right behind the rear axle, outside the protective frame of the car, ruptured. Gasoline spilled out, and in seconds the car ignited. Flames exploded around the girls. Lynn and Donna were trapped. There was no time to react, no chance to escape. They were consumed by the fire. Judy survived the blast barely. She was rushed to the hospital, her body scorched by the flames. For 9 agonizing hours, she fought to live. But the burns were too severe. She died later that night. 3 young women, full of life, wiped out in a crash that should never have turned deadly. But the most horrifying part, it was preventable, and Ford knew it. As investigators dug into the crash, attention turned to Pinto's design, specifically that vulnerable fuel tank. This wasn't the first time a Pinto had gone up in flames after a rear-end collision. Whispers of its danger had circulated for years, even within Ford itself. But this time, the crash hit harder. This time, it was impossible to ignore. Then came a cruel twist of fate. In the months after Judy and Lynn's deaths, their grieving parents received a recall notice from Ford for the very car that had killed their daughters. Too late, far too late. And it got worse. Court documents and internal memos revealed the unthinkable. Ford had known about Pinto's deadly flaw. Engineers had flagged it. Executives had discussed it. And still, they did nothing. A chilling cost-benefit analysis had weighed the price of human lives against the cost of redesigning the car. Ford had decided it was cheaper to let people die and quietly settle the lawsuits than to fix the problem. The outrage that followed shook the nation. Lawsuits piled up, protests grew. Under pressure from regulators and the public, Ford finally issued a massive recall in 1978. More than 1.5 million Pintos pulled from the streets, but the recall didn't undo what had already been done. It didn't bring back Judy, Lynn, or Donna. It didn't erase the pain that had seared itself into the lives of their families. The Pinto scandal became one of the darkest chapters in American automotive history. It exposed how corporations could gamble with lives and lose. It forced the country to reckon with a terrifying truth. Even a trusted name can hide something lethal. Ford stopped producing the Pinto after 1980, but the name still lingers, a symbol of greed, negligence, and lost lives.
Burger King is recalling millions of Pokemon balls after a baby playing with one died.
Jillian Alto never imagined that something so small, so seemingly harmless, could destroy her world. In the quiet of their home in Sonora, California, she watched her baby daughter, Kira Alexis Murphy, giggle and play in her little playpen, clutching a brightly colored toy shaped like a Pokeball. It had come from a fast food kids meal, one of those plastic novelties that millions of parents across the country had brought home without a second thought. There were no warnings, no instructions, just another toy in a world built for children. Kira was the youngest of Jill's 3 daughters, just 13 months old, still discovering what her hands could do, what the world felt like. As a single mother, juggling 3 kids under the age of 6, Jill did what any parent might do in a rare moment of peace. She stepped away. A quick shower, 10, maybe 15 minutes, just long enough to recharge before the chaos of feeding, dressing, and wrangling little ones began again. But behind the bathroom door, a silent nightmare was unfolding. Kira had been surrounded by toys. Safe, Jill thought, contained. But her curious little hands had managed to pry open the red and white Pokeball, splitting it into 2 halves. To her, it wasn't a choking hazard. It was just something new, something shiny, something to explore. She lifted the red half to her face. In an instant, it formed a deadly seal over her tiny nose and mouth, a perfect, airtight trap. She couldn't call for help. She couldn't make a sound. By the time Jill stepped out of the shower, everything had already changed. The house was too quiet. When she reached the playpen, her world stopped. There lay Kira, unmoving, silent, the plastic still covering her face. Jill tore it away, screaming, begging, hoping for breath, but it was too late. Her baby was gone. The horror didn't end there. Jill's 2 other daughters, 5 and 4, had witnessed the aftermath, watched their mother sob over the still body of their baby sister, unable to comprehend what had happened. What followed was a different kind of devastation, one driven by rage, disbelief, and betrayal. That Pokeball toy had been part of Burger King's wildly successful Pokemon promotion. Tens of millions of them had been handed out nationwide. Families had lined up for them. Kids had collected all 59 variations. And no one had warned them that these bright, glossy toys could turn lethal in the hands of a toddler. Burger King's initial response only deepened the wound. The company refused to recall the toys. They claimed it wasn't clear that the Pokeball was to blame. Meanwhile, the packaging declared that the toys were safety tested and recommended for children of all ages. But children were dying. Russ Rader, a spokesman for the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission, didn't mince words. He publicly condemned Burger King for its refusal to act. But the company hesitated, watching the outrage build, watching parents like Jill crumble under the weight of preventable tragedy. And then it happened again. Just 12 days after Kira's death, December 23, 1999, in Leavenworth, Kansas, another child, an 18-month-old girl, nearly suffocated the same way. She lived, barely, but it was enough. The truth could no longer be ignored. Finally, the toys were recalled. The promotion, once the most ambitious and expensive in Burger King's history, was over. But the damage had already been done. The $22 million investment, the partnerships, the endless marketing, none of it mattered anymore. Not to the parents who were now afraid to trust anything their child touched. Not to Jill, whose arms would always feel too empty. Kira's death wasn't an accident. It was a warning that came too late. A fatal design flaw hidden in something no one thought to fear. A toy that looked like a treat, but turned into a trap.
We have breaking news this morning about a very popular baby product. We first brought you the warning 2 weeks ago about the dangers of baby slings. This morning, 1 million baby slings are being recalled. They're being taken off store shelves, and they will no longer even be made.
It was supposed to be just another helpful tool, a sling, soft, convenient, comforting. But for one young Oregon family, what seemed like a thoughtful invention turned into an unthinkable nightmare. Lisa Cochran and Jared Fowler were only 6 days into parenthood. just beginning to feel the weight and wonder of caring for their newborn son, Derek. They were exhausted, overwhelmed, happy, the kind of tired joy only new parents understand. On May 7th, 2009, they decided to get out of the house for a bit, to run errands together, to breathe fresh air, to return briefly to something like normal life. They loaded Derek into the car and headed to Costco in Salem. Lisa cradled her tiny son in a product called the Sling Rider, made by California-based company Infantino. It draped across her chest, creating a cozy pouch where Derek could rest against her. The design had become trendy, marketed as intimate, safe, ideal for bonding, the kind of thing you'd trust just because it was sold for babies. Derek had been fussy that morning. Lisa nursed him twice before they left, hoping the familiar warmth would soothe him. It seemed to work. Once he was nestled inside the sling, he quieted, peaceful, still. As they wandered the aisles, carrots, oranges, oatmeal, little essentials for their new life, they kept glancing at Derek. Assuming he was sleeping, everything seemed fine. Nothing looked wrong. They even sat down for hot dogs in the food court, feeling for a moment like any ordinary couple with a new baby. But the truth was already unraveling. Quietly, invisibly. They didn't know that inside that sling, Derek had slipped into a position that babies cannot survive. His tiny chin curled forward. The soft pouch pressed his face against fabric, against his mother's chest. No struggle, no cry, just silence. By the time they returned to their van in the parking lot, Derek hadn't made a sound in over an hour. But babies sleep, don't they? They sleep a lot. Then Jared noticed it. Something in Derek's color. Something is wrong. They pulled him out of the sling, and the world shattered. His back had turned blue. He wasn't breathing. Jared performed CPR, trying to bring his son back to life. But there was no breath, no heartbeat. Derek Fowler, just 6 days old, was gone. Later, the medical examiner's report would confirm what Lisa and Jared already lived with every day: compression asphyxia. Derek had suffocated while pressed inside the sling. And this was not the first time. Reports began to surface, warnings that had been whispered for years. Since 1998, at least 7 babies had died, and dozens more had been seriously injured in slings like the one Lisa used. Experts had long known the risks, that the fabric could force an infant's chin to their chest, cutting off airflow, or press tightly against their nose and mouth without anyone noticing. The babies couldn't cry out. They couldn't shift. They just stopped breathing. Don Mays, head of consumer safety at Consumer Reports, had already written a report warning about the dangers of the Sling Rider. Months before Derek died, he knew, others knew, but the product was still on the market. It took Derek's death, one more name in a growing list, for anyone to finally act. In the aftermath, more than 1 million of these slings were recalled. Lawsuits were filed. Infantino was forced to confront the truth, that their design, cozy and convenient as it appeared, was hiding a lethal flaw.
Everyone always used to tell me that Kinder Eggs were illegal. And then the other day I was at the gas station and I saw them and I was like, I guess they're not illegal anymore, right?
The joy was simple, pure, innocent. A child, barely 3 years old, smiling as she unwrapped a beloved treat. It was one of those quiet, happy moments that define childhood. A warm afternoon in southwestern France, a visit with her mother, and the sweet promise of a Kinder Surprise egg. That familiar, colorful foil wrapping, the chocolate shell, the tiny mystery hidden inside. She was just a little girl, doing what millions of children around the world have done, biting into a treat that was supposed to bring joy. But in an instant, the sweetness turned into something far more sinister. As her mother watched nearby, the child eagerly discovered the small toy inside. Reports would later say it had wheels, like many of the playful trinkets tucked inside Kinder eggs. But this time, something went horribly wrong. One of the small pieces came loose, and with the unthinking curiosity that defines childhood, she put it in her mouth. A moment, that's all it took. The tiny object lodged in her throat. Suddenly, she couldn't breathe. Panic overtook the room. Her mother screamed, reaching for her, trying to clear the blockage, calling for help. Her grandfather arrived and rushed to do what he could. He managed to remove the plastic from her airway, but by then, the damage had already been done. She had stopped breathing. Her small body had been without oxygen for too long. Firefighters revived her, sparking a flicker of hope, that desperate hope every parent clings to. She was rushed to the hospital in Toulouse. Machines tried to sustain her life, but the truth was brutal. She never woke up. She died just a few days later in the stillness of a hospital room, surrounded by her devastated family. The official cause of death? Mechanical asphyxiation. A toy had taken her life. The tragedy echoed across France and beyond. Whispers turned to outrage. How could something so small, something inside a children's candy, become a death sentence? Kinder Surprise eggs, adored by millions, have long sparked concern among safety experts. While they've been banned in the United States for years due to the choking risks of hiding small toys inside food, they remain widely available in Europe and elsewhere. Now, with a child's life lost, questions erupted again. French prosecutors launched an investigation. Was the toy defective? Was there a design flaw? Had it been used incorrectly? Or was this terrifyingly just a tragic possibility baked into the product all along? Ferrero, the company behind Kinder Surprise, issued a statement. Condolences, sorrow, promises of cooperation, assurances that child safety is their highest priority, that their toys are rigorously tested, but none of it mattered to the people who mattered most. Because for one family in France, words can't bring back a child. For one mother, there is no comfort in corporate statements, no reassurance in test results, just the memory of her daughter's joy and the cruel silence that followed. And for every parent who has ever handed their child a treat, trusting it was safe, this story leaves behind a haunting question. How could something so innocent carry such a terrible cost?